Hola, hola, ¿qué hay? Os agradecemos que os vayáis sentando.
Hello, everyone. If you could please be seated, we're going to start the roundtable on hate speech, disinformation, and moderating content in social networks. We have David Reichel from the FRA. So if you're not wearing headsets, you will need them for the interpretation. And the facilitator is Josefina Mordiz Gonzalez. I will introduce her and then she will introduce the rest of the members. She holds a degree in psychology. She's a civil servant and she's worked in the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Equality, Ministry of Inclusion, and Migration. She's worked in roles related to health related sciences, the Observatory for Women, and promoting gender equal treatment and equal opportunities. She leads the Forum for the Social Integration of Migrants within the Observatory Against Racism and Xenophobia. Welcome, everyone, to the session today. I understand it's late in the morning and lunchtime is around the corner. I would first like to thank the Ministry of Equality for inviting me as a facilitator to this table in representation of OverAXI, the Observatory Against Racism and Xenophobia, and which is part of the Ministry of Inclusion, Social Security, and Migrations. At OverAXI, the work we carry out is to create a platform to expand the knowledge and analysis in the fight against racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and other types of discrimination, and as well as hate speech. The tools we have are the following. We do data collection, we put together projects and research, and we take stock of research carried out by other national and international institutions. For this, we collaborate with the European Union to abide by the Code of Conduct to fight against hate speech on the internet. This was signed in 2016 by the European Union and the European platforms. In the framework of this collaboration, since May 2020, OverAXI has been working to delimit hate speech by monitoring hate speech in social media such as Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. The roundtable today is hate speech, disinformation, and facilitating content in social media. Through this roundtable, we will explore how contents can be facilitated to reduce and minimize hate speech and disinformation online. We will also touch upon the challenges of moderating these contents and the impact that hate speech has on society. We will also cover the legal measures at work and whether any others need to be proposed. This session will last until 2:15, and we will give the floor for 6 minutes to each of the speakers to address a question, and there will be 2 questions for each panelist. And at the end of the round table, we will have some time for the audience to ask their questions. I come from the north of Spain, so I'm a bit more strict with the times. I was worried when I listened to Beatrice's comments talking about the flexibility when using time here in the south. So I will try to blend in coming from the north here in the south and their flexibility. The people on the dais are very knowledgeable in the field, and the 4 of them are extremely committed with fighting hate speech and preserving human rights. Let me now introduce them. To my right David Reichel. He works for the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights, the FRA. He works in the digital and data department of the FRA, and he's responsible for managing the FRA's work on artificial intelligence and online content moderation, which resulted in several reports, such as the report on artificial intelligence and fundamental rights. To my further right, Tomás Fernández Villazala. He's the head of the National Office for Combating Hate Crimes within the Ministry of Interior. He's held that role since the inception of the office back in 2018. He holds a PhD in law from the National University of UNED, and then a degree in law from the University of Valladolid, a degree in psychology from UNED, and a degree in criminology from the Catholic University of Murcia. He's also commander of the Civil Guard with 36 years of service. He collaborates with several universities as a teacher and has published extensively, you can check this on the internet, in the field of law and criminology. And then my other site, Natalia Diaz, she's the head of verification at maldita.es. She's a journalist and audiovisual communicator with a social focus. She's currently coordinating Maldito Bulo, the verification section at maldita.es, and Maldita Migración, the section focused on dismantling disinformation that supports hate speech about migrants, ethnic and religious minorities. In the past, she's worked researching poverty and the migration discourse at the Por Causa Foundation and coordinating the 3.5 million blog on development in El País. It's also part of the Filtrala project, a secure and anonymous leak platform for press and civil society. And finally, Demetrio Gomez Avila, born in Tijuana, Mexico. He's an activist and trainer specialized in human rights and intersectionality. He's been a member and trainer of the Council of Europe, the European Union, and other institutions linked to racialized activism. He's part of the LGBTQIA+ and Roma platform in Europe. He's a member of the Intergovernmental Committee for AI at the Council of Europe. So let me now ask the questions. We will start with David, then Thomas, then Natalia, and finally Demetrio. David, the first question for you. What are the main challenges to moderate online hate speech from a fundamental rights point of view?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Ministry of Equality for organizing this fantastic event in the first place and for inviting me to speak here. It's a big pleasure to be here with you. As we all know, the way we communicate has changed dramatically in the past years. This is generally very positive. We have new ways of how we can, we have new ways on how we can stay in contact with family, how we can communicate. There are also new ways how we can express political opinions, can participate, join online discussions. So this is very positive. However, of course, it also brings negatives with us. And this is also why we have this discussion here. There are also new ways how people can express racism, how they can disseminate this racism and also other illegal content. Of course, the European Union, but also national governments are aware of this and have reacted to this and have updated the laws that try to address these new challenges of online communication. Most notably, in the European Union, there's the so-called Digital Services Act, which updated the laws in the way how platforms are governed and how they have to deal with illegal content and also protect other fundamental rights. It only entered into force in full 1 month ago, so that's quite a new law. At the EU Fundamental Rights Agency, we of course also had to react to these new challenges and started a project in 2020 where we engaged in data collection from social media for the first time, and where we tried to find incidents of hatred on the one hand targeted at women, but on the other hand, targeted at ethnic minorities, people of African descent, Jews and Roma in selected EU member states from selected platforms. So we published this report in November last year. It's also available online for free, where we collected over 340,000 posts. And out of those, we selected 1,600 and had a more in-depth analysis of what kind of hatred you find when you search for them with specific keywords. So what we found was that online hate is quite widespread. Over half of the posts that we analyzed in more detail included some elements of hatred. This most often included offensive speech in 85% of the cases. But there was also a lot of denigration. So often people were compared to objects or animals in their hateful posts. Negative stereotyping, also very common in almost 40% of the posts. And even in 16% of the posts, we found some elements of incitement to violence, incitement to hatred, or incitement to discrimination. We found misogyny was quite prevalent. So especially the offensive content was most often targeted at women. But negative stereotyping was most common when it comes to people of African descent, Roma, and Jews in the keywords. And that also indicates that racism is expressed, maybe expressed more often in more subtle ways online, and it's more difficult to capture. We also found high levels of harassment. Almost half of the posts were not general statements, negative statements about certain groups, but really directed at specific individuals or people. So that was a surprise to us as well. However, in the report, we not only wanted to provide a picture of what online hate looks like online when you do a snapshot of in certain countries from certain platforms on certain groups, we also wanted to tell the story how it feels to measure online hate. And this is a challenge on its own. First of all, it is not always clear what is hateful and what is not hateful. We had well-trained coders who tried to assess these posts on different elements. And in one of 5 posts, these coders actually said, I'm uncertain about my coding because it's not really clear if this is hateful or not. We also had a smaller number of posts then more assessed in more detail with legal experts, and they compared it to our expert coders. And they were even more careful and were not sure, like, when do these posts actually pass the threshold of illegality online. So here there was more of disagreement. However, this challenge is quite real because the sheer amount of posts online requires to moderate it in a very quick fashion. And this is why it's important to highlight that the moderation of online content is prone to errors. And this way, it is important to create a better understanding of where we actually stand when it comes to content moderation. Because at the moment, we don't know. We know there will always be posts that should not be online, but slip through the content moderation systems. And there will also always be posts that are legal, but will be deleted on an erroneous basis. But what we don't know is actually, as I said, how much we're infringing the freedom of expression of people by deleting too much, and how often illegal content and online hate actually slips through the content moderation system. So we suggest in our report ways forward. First of all, it is important to provide a safer online space for everyone. And this means when dealing with online hate to really pay attention to protected characteristics. There is obviously a lot of hate, but if the hate is targeted at a person because of their ethnic origin, because of their gender, because of their sexual orientation, then this is a qualifying difference which need to be paid attention to. We obviously need more guidance and examples. What is illegal online and what is legal online to make the systems and detect illegal hate speech much better. To make this a reality, obviously there's no silver bullet. There's no one single solution. And it's really important that all of us work together in this area. First of all, public authorities, of course, need to work on illegal content and need to find ways to detect them. But there are also limits to them. We cannot monitor all online communication. Individual users need to play their role. There should be easy ways on how you can quickly report illegal hate speech online, because they will come across this. Several reports from the Fundamental Rights Agency show that people are actually not reporting often enough incidents of racism. So here, this also needs to be increased online. We need to create and fund so-called networks of so-called trusted flaggers. This is most often civil society organizations who watch the civil space online and then can report in a trusted way to the platforms that these posts are reacted in a quicker manner. And lastly, of course, the platforms have to play their role as well. They have to engage in their terms and conditions, in their detection of online hate. And here, that's the last point I'm making. The problem is still that it is hard to access those platforms. We also wanted to include in our research Facebook and Instagram, for example, but couldn't access it because the platforms are very protective of their data. And here, the Digital Services Act, for example, provides a new framework that will allow researchers to better access data, to really get a better understanding of where we stand to improve the situation online.
Gracias, David.
Thank you, David. And Thomas, many challenges, huh? Many things to do. What are the main accomplishments by the hate crime office unit when researching and investigating this area, given the importance of hate speech?
Well, first of all, thank you. I'd like to thank the Ministry of Equality and Marijuana and the Director General, Beatriz, and I'd like to thank the organizers of this event because these conferences are really very productive. You always take a lot of homework. I mean, you come here to submit a presentation, but also to take some homework with you. It is important to reflect, to discuss, to improve. True that we've made a lot of progress, but there's still a long way ahead. And at the National Office to Combat Hate Crimes, since 2018, we've been discussing this possibility. First, you need to know what the problems are about. We always call them hate speech, hate crimes from the criminal procedure point of view, but there are many other things behind them, such as the social element. And this is the approach we want to take. We have colleagues from the different law enforcement agencies, and in our working groups, we have very close relations with the regional authorities and the local police as well, because any victim, what they need to see when they see a person in uniform is to see support, to see help, service. We would need it to change this former point of view we had to see hate crimes and hate speech first from the criminal standpoint. Now we need to see it first from the social standpoint. And the same applies to the victims of hate crimes and hate speech. To that, we needed to work with the civil society organizations, with NGOs, not only from the central level, but also from all regional and local law enforcement agencies. The first thing they requested is awareness raising, and as well as dissemination and information. These are the three key elements. You need to always bear them in mind, because things that you thought that had been already solved, well, you have the next generations coming, and they need to be, and the awareness needs to be raised, and still dissemination needs to be done. You need to isolate those people who would believe that they can be, their thoughts, their ideas can be tolerated. There's zero tolerance for this, and this is something that we need to be working on. And I believe that our law enforcement agencies here in Spain are very much aware that they need to be empathic, because I mean, yes, we are law enforcement agents, and officers, but we are part of the society. We are one. We are just one more group. And there is anyone, any of your friends, any of your relatives, any of your members even can become a victim. So this is not only awareness raising within the general population, but also within the law enforcement agencies as well. And to this, the civil society organizations, the third sector organization, they are essential for us and they have, and we have been working hand in hand with them to really become better trained and much more aware of this phenomenon. Not only the National Police Academy and National Police School, but also the local police schools and the regional schools and academies have now this combat in their own curricula. We've had already 2 national action plans, and we have specialized staff now in the subject, both at the national police level and the Guardia Civil level, so they can in turn train and raise awareness among their colleagues. We also, and that's very important, we are part of European projects through Overx. We have been working on hate speech, on Real App. The first one was for monitoring and try to detect potential hate speech, label it, and see which one is hate speech and which ones are hateful speech. And we are improving our labeling in classification, and not only to be reactive, but to be proactive, to have a counter narrative, and we're using our algorithm for that. And there was an international seminar on this subject very recently, and we're working together with University of Jaén, Salamanca, and Barcelona. And they are working very, very well in these algorithms. They're working on this counter narrative. It is also essential to have scientific papers and to have science, to have literature behind you to support you. So we have a rigorous approach through scientific papers. So it's not just something that someone said or overheard on the street. So we have been publishing scientific papers on hate speech, and we have now this one about to be published, a study on the space-time analysis of certain things that could be considered as normal or standard, but behaviors that could have a bearing on hate speech online. We all know that the offline reality has a bearing on the online behavior. We all know this. Yes, this is something that is widely known, but we needed scientific papers to support it. In Europe, it's for the first time we have a joint action day on this. The first one was was led by France. So law enforcement agencies, not only from Spain, but I think it was France, Germany, Austria, and Italy. We worked together in December on investigations and detection of online hate speech crimes. We coordinated through Europol. And this should continue. It was led by France last time. Now it will be led by us. So other countries can also make the most of this movement, of this driving force. And we need to keep on working little by little, so we have a harmonized approach. Yes, Tomás was saying it's the social sphere, how important it is, the offline component in all this. So, and this leads me to my question to Natalia. Natalia, I'd like to know whether you have identified if the mislabeling or the fake news about migrants is based on a specific ideas, and whether this has trickled down to the Spanish society. Well, okay, maldita.es, maybe. For those of you who don't know, we are a mass media. We are a verification tool. We don't want fake news to permeate society. We are very much aware of the impact they can have, and so we want to provide society with the tools to combat disinformation. In maldita.es, we have a specific section devoted to migration. In my presentation, I'll be speaking about migrants, about racialized people, about Muslim citizens, and this really is connected to what was discussed in the previous roundtable through fake news. Muslim people are always systematically identified as immigrants, whereas never considered as Spanish nationals in most cases. So in 2022, we tried to collect and gather all the fake news ideas, fake news, and actually narratives related to migrants. So they are basically first the connection between migrants and violence. So it was identifying migrants and racialized people, Black people, Muslim people. All of them were considered as just in one same group, even though they are quite different. And they are considered in fake news as a danger to our security, for national security, and for the physical safety of people in Spain. That was the first access of because we're speaking about disinformation, as if disinformation was something very, very far away from us. But no, they are very particular. There are very specific examples, for instance, like this viral WhatsApp message that is shared through your group, with your friends, with your neighbors, with your family, and any audio messages that can be recorded with just your cell phone, and that starts and it becomes viral with a message about this Black person who has done such and such, and so you're really connecting all those all Black people with crime. Secondly, for instance, there was a very viral message and video in all social media, and in Telegram, Instagram, WhatsApp, etc. There was a guy, a young boy, who was playing with some swords, and with some machetes actually. It was a performance actually, and these informers have a very clear goal, and they said that this guy was from Morocco, because they're always targeting people from the Maghreb, and they said it was this guy. He was a Moroccan boy who was coming to Spain with one of these dinghy boats, and his objective and his target was doing something to you with those machetes when he arrived in Spain, and it was completely fake. The guy was a performer in Egypt. That was what we finally verified. And then second access, the narratives about what foreigners will do when they come to live in your country. They will take all of your benefits away. They will take any of the subsidies away from you, because all those subsidies and benefits will be given to the foreigners. So disinformers tend to circulate fake news around this. One example that's quite repetitive: racialized people, Muslim women with a scarf. And this is very frequently seen in social media. They are, first and foremost, always considered as foreigners, and they will always be the beneficiaries of all social benefits. And and they are, and they do And so many of these women try to react, very with humor, saying, well, okay, see, I'm a Muslim girl, so of course I'm receiving this benefits. And what do the disinformers or the misinformers do? Well, they take those videos, those funny videos from Muslim women, and say they are the truth. And look, they are even laughing at us. They laugh at us because they get all of our benefits. Then third, there are no Spaniards who are Muslims or who have a different culture. And everybody who comes from abroad, from foreigners, come here to try and invade us and impose their culture on us. Again, Muslim women. One very clear example, one of the fake news that comes across the social media every increasingly so. It's a group of Muslim parents have demanded that at the school canteen the pork is banned. So this is a message chain that we have identified for several years now. They change, they mutate, they are, every time they say it has happened in different parts of Spain, and we have already proven it. They are fake news, that they are completely false, but well, that's what we are doing. And then after COVID, migrants mostly associated with a hazard to public health. There were many different contents and message chains and saying that there was a group of migrants that had escaped from their shelter who had COVID and would be spreading COVID across the country. And this has happened with other diseases as well. This is yet another staple in disinformation wars. And then, unfortunately, we did a survey in 2021, and there was a macro poll, a macro survey in Spain about these narratives, about this disinformation campaigns on migrants. And we asked about different stories that we had seen in the media. And one out of every three Spaniards believe that migrants have a priority when it comes to being beneficiaries of public subsidies and benefits. And vastly, half the Spanish population believes that some unaccompanied minors have a monthly salary, and this is what's really shocking. But well, thank you very much, Natalia. Now we are getting into the heart of the matter, because the legislation and the projects and initiatives that that David and Tomas have told us about could seem as if they are a bit far away from us, but Natalia has really brought us down to earth. Now, Demetrio, what impact does this hate speech have on the groups that they are aimed at? Well, I mean, you said this to me on a silver plate, really. And thank you very much for inviting me to be here and for the trust you have in me. And well, that's it. Okay, COVID has really made us look, to look inwards and to see how we behave as a society. What's our mass behavior? Because this has been a very critical turning point that has led us to reconsider many things. One of the things I've been doing lately was a study of the Roma population during COVID, and to comparing the situation with the situation in other countries. And we realized that repression has different mechanisms. So it's not really identifying what the target of that repression is, but what the mechanisms that are addressed at them are to lead to exclusion and to lead to discrimination and isolation. During COVID, you had very shameful examples here in Seville, very concerning examples, unfortunately, because there were very many different fake news spreading around against the Roma population, against the 3,000 housing units that its neighborhood here is mostly Roma neighborhood here in Seville. And of course, minorities are all the same. I mean, everybody in a minority, everybody shares the same beliefs, the same behaviors, etc. Because only, and diversity is only possible if you're white, right? So if you're a Roma, you're Roma, and you're exactly the same as any other Roma. And then, for instance, there was this fake news about this Roma family coming from Valencia to Seville and say that they were spreading COVID, and it becomes viral everywhere in Spain about the 3,000 housing units neighborhood here in Seville. Some people were actually demanding that the National Army, the armed forces, came here to block the neighborhood so as not to let anyone in or out. So I mean, so we have to endure anti-gypsyism. And as our colleague in the previous roundtable explained, this is a cross-cutting form of discrimination, and it affects us at all levels, and it has almost become invisible. People don't even realize that they are being that there is anti-gypsyism in the way they behave, because they have, I mean, it is so embedded in the brains and in their ideas. They have not so normalized anti-gypsyism so much that they don't even realize that they are doing that. And for instance, extreme right groups have a very clear goal. They want to, to destroy and end diversity. And it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we are all diverse, so it would be absolutely impossible to achieve. And this clash of civilization speeches and the discourse I mean, it has really a very negative effect. The other is a barbarian, is not doesn't share your values. It spreads disease. So when you try and report one hate speech, in these cases, sometimes this is like, I mean, they say, well, this is just an opinion. This is not really hate speech. It is just a way of seeing things. No, if you're speaking about humans, you're speaking about rights, you're speaking about identity, what you're doing, you're excluding people. You are discriminating, and this is what you're doing. Okay, thank you, Demetrio.
Okay, so again, David Reichel will take the floor, and this is my next question to him. What is the role of technology and AI when moderating content on social media?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, the challenge of moderating this hate speech and content online, one of the challenges is linked to the sheer amount of posts. It's millions of posts every day that the platforms have to deal with. And one of the challenges I have not mentioned before is obviously that technology is increasingly used to support moderating content online. This is quite normal, as we know, for example, for spam, our email inboxes, they are quite working well. It's done on a daily basis. The same happens on online platforms. Spam is almost 100% identified by technology and blocked. Now, and that's also linked actually to the pandemic, in the past years, also the detection and removal of hate speech has increasingly been done with the use of algorithms, often referred to as artificial intelligence. At Facebook, for example, in 2017, it was only a quarter, 24% of hate speech cases were detected through algorithms. Yeah. So in 2017, only a quarter of posts of hate speech at Facebook were detected through automated systems. This rose to over 80% in 2022, and I expect it to be even much higher these days. The challenge of using this technology is that the technology as such is also biased. It embeds societal stereotypes and prejudices. So technology is not neutral on its own. To prove this point, we also conducted a study ourselves 2 years ago, and where we collected, we used data sets in English language, in German language, and Italian language from social media that already had labels on them: hate speech, not hate speech, hate speech, not hate speech. And then we developed different algorithms, not so complex ones, more complex algorithms, and not to use them to detect hate speech, but to test those algorithms. So what we did, we invented thousands of different sentences, offensive sentences, not offensive sentences, and then changed only certain words in these sentences. And then changing this one word was a direct evidence of what this changed word does to the algorithms. And obviously, it showed quite high levels of biases towards certain groups. For example, especially the term Muslim, the term Jew, really made the algorithms to predict at much higher rates that a certain sentence, even if it's not offensive, to be offensive. To give a very simple example, we used also the sentence I am, and then used different words for this. For example, I am Buddhist. None of the algorithms predicted this to be offensive. I am Christian. None of the algorithms predicted this to be offensive. I am Jewish. On average, it increased. And some of the algorithms even considered this to be an offensive sentence. And then it was even worse with I am Muslim, where the majority of the different algorithms we had actually predicted this sentence to be offensive. So this is really important to keep in mind when these algorithms are used, that they are, of course, not perfect. And we need to know in which direction these errors go. We also did another test in this report, which actually wasn't reported so far very much at this stage. We also used another algorithm that predicted for the English data set if it used African American dialect. And then we correlated the dialect predictions with the error rates in predictions. And what we showed was that the higher the likelihood that a certain text uses African American dialect words, the higher was the likelihood to falsely claim a non-offensive sentence to be offensive. So there's also a correlation in the way people speak in the likelihood of detecting offensive speech. And that, of course, directly impacts different people in the way they speak online. And lastly, there's another challenge with the use of algorithms, because algorithms are not only used to moderate content, but also to curate content, as it's called, to decide what you see first on your social media newsfeed. And that was also mentioned already in the morning. There is some evidence that shows that hateful content online is promoted online. Why is this the case? These algorithms are obviously made to increase screen time. It should make us to look as long as possible on our cell phones. And unfortunately, hatred is raising attention. So it makes us looking at our phone more often. And without looking why this is happening, there's obviously a problem with algorithms potentially promoting hatred. So what's the solution? Obviously, the solution, one of the solutions, is to test for bias. As technology needs to be used in certain contexts, it is important to closely look into these algorithms. Do not accept that this is an opaque algorithm, some artificial intelligence that does something we don't understand. That's not true. We really need to force those developing and using algorithms to be transparent. This should inform what training data, for example, were used, what data set was used to learn for the algorithm the patterns to detect hate speech, for example. Who labeled those training data sets? From my previous and the other report, we showed how difficult it is. And we also know that those annotating hate speech also have their own biases. The threshold of a man for considering something as sexist hate may be different to a woman who may be affected by this speech. What is more, these tests need to be put in place and then assessed in view of the purpose of the tool. So the last point I have, I know I'm running out of time, biases also exist in so-called general purpose AI models. These are models like ChatGPT using. These are general structures of the language. And when we used our algorithms, we also used these more complex ones. And the biases actually came from different directions. So also these ready-made, off-the-shelf AI tools have societal biases that need to be assessed before any of such tools can be assessed if it's fit for purpose.
Gracias, David. Tomás, desde tu punto de vista, ¿qué posibles soluciones
Thank you,
podrían...
David. Thomas, from your point of view, what would be the solutions to remove hate speech and disinformation? Well, I believe we've heard the solutions through today and yesterday, and everybody agrees, all stakeholders agree. Education is essential from the very early stage, working with children, teenagers, and adults as well. Even if it's hard, exerting this change with trained professionals is hard, but as Demetrio mentioned, and I agree with him completely, prejudice. And we've been talking about cognitive bias, but this is rather behavioral bias. It's part of us. It's part of our inner selves. So we need to think about these cases when we're acting automatically based on our prejudice, because it's inherent from one generation to the next. It's not easy to do away with this. It's one layer upon another. And it's important to shed light on this and reflect on this, work with children from early on to make sure they don't have that bias. But in order to achieve this with children, adults need to be aware of their prejudice, because we all do. And we really need to think our prejudice, what's our prejudice, to make sure it doesn't override my decisions automatically. And we see what's happening with fake news. I retweet, I forward on WhatsApp without looking into it. If I take a minute to compare and think about it, I might realize that what I'm writing has nothing to do with the truth, or that they're trying to manipulate me. We see this very clearly. And this is a very clear cognitive bias. We have the false consensus bias, meaning the automation of, we automate the sheer amount of information we receive, and we screen for that information based on the bias that we've inherited from one generation to the next inadvertently. And that is a problem. So we shouldn't really think this is an evil person. No, some will be and others will just won't realize. So we really need to make them realize. And so this is one of the points we will really need to work on it. It's quite complicated. So this pressure from the group, we all belong to society, and if we stray away from the mainstream social discourse, we're going to be left aside. No, actually, whoever is left aside is the one that is not paying attention to the diversity. And this is very much linked to group pressure. And I agree, we've heard great ideas on sports. This is great to promote healthy competition. Of course, you can compete and fight for a win, but of course, you need to do this within the rules. I think we mentioned this. My daughter skates in Toledo, and it was very fun. I went with her, and it was just so much nicer than when I go see my boys football matches because everybody's ready to jump and on edge. And I don't want to be on the clock when I'm watching a game. It's really a shame. It's great to be part of a group and belong, but we need respect. And so, to the point mentioned by the roundtable on sports. And then another bias, this is a bias that we see in hate speech, this illusion bias, meaning we don't verify, we don't fact check. This is very well done in some media, short, repetitive messages sent from different places. It's repeated often and they're short, and automatically we come to believe them without fact checking. And if we spread them, we're adding to the fake news, to the disinformation. So we really need to exert control here. And with our colleagues in national protection and the law enforcement agents through the judiciary, police, and other bodies, we're working with them so that when they pay visits to the school, the same way that often they ask them to talk about drugs and they ask them to talk about social media. And that's where we need to add information on values and prejudice. That's where we need to start this endeavor. Of course, this starts with the teachers who are the authority in the classroom and parents. So we're trying to work with parents associations. Now, regarding universities, we go to many universities to open their eyes to this and try to stir a conversation. And of course, we need to receive the support of the third sector. We love having training with them both ways because this is on all of us. And quite often, because they are directly supporting victims and helping them, they can help us. And then beyond the automatism and these algorithm tools, we can do a lot to counter the narrative. Anonymously, we can, well, make people think about what they're doing. Everybody can contribute their 2 pence to this within society at large. And it's not necessarily hate speech, it might be, but it might be hateful and harmful. And we don't need to go to the gist of it. We maybe just need to raise awareness about what they're saying. Great. Natalia, you've talked about the role that different areas of society can play to fight this scourge. I want to ask you, what is the role of mass media and social media platforms to promote a responsible use of information shared online?
Thanks. Thank you very much for the question. Let me split my answer into 2 parts. First, mass media, of course, they need to play a role there. They need to be vigorous and to verify and check their content before they publish anything. They should be intrinsic to journalism, but inevitably fake news might find their way into mass media. For instance, in May 2021, at the massive arrival of people to Ceuta, well, what happened? There was disinformation or misinformation, serious misinformation crisis. There were many fake news circulating among very fraught social attention. And among those fake news, well, apparently there were many incidents were happening in Ceuta, like arson in supermarkets, attacks on schools. It was absolutely untrue, and there was this chaos. We saw that there was an organization behind the way of these fake news made their way into national news. In one national newspaper, said that actually stated that there was a public school that had been set on fire in Ceuta. it was absolutely false. It just took us one morning to ring up all of the public schools in Ceuta to find out whether any schools had been set on fire that morning. And it was not true, and simply not true. But that made headline news. And so we need to really verify and check and fact check everything that we publish. And this we should do as journalists. Of course, error is only human, but you need to do it. And if you have made a mistake, then you need to admit it, and you need to recognize what you've done, and you need to come clear. Then to come clean about it. And then, of course, we have a major loudspeaker. We in mass media, and a good representation or a right representation of Muslim citizens is essential. You cannot speak only with Muslims as migrants or Roma population as victims of or aggressors rather, but they are also victims, and they are not the cause of these. They are not the cause of these events. They are the victims in many cases, and we need to have them as experts, as consultants. For instance, Noah, she is a Muslim woman. She is a doctor. She's a physician. So we need to take the people from those particular groups as experts, as consultants in their area of expertise. This is what we are doing in our association, and we are trying to implement a new project for these. These people are the voice of expertise, and they speak as experts, as not only as targets of these attacks. Then, social media. Well, you have the algorithms. Any fake news that is focused on emotions become viral. As Thomas said, well, this is an echo chamber, and you finally only get content to your delivered to your inbox that is related to the same emotion, only criminalizing migrants, for instance. In the case about disinformation and migrants, this happens, but also in case of scientific negationism. So you end up in finding yourself in a bubble, and you fall deeper and deeper into these social networks. So the social media platforms should be combating this. In Maldita, once we find or detect a fake news, we don't want social platforms, social media to delete it immediately, and but to keep it, to investigate it. We are working with Meta, so they verify content, check or fact check content on Instagram and WhatsApp. At first, to find proof and evidence that this is fake, that this is false. Their post will not be deleted, and they will be notified that they have posted something that is false. So, but they will have a very big glowing sign saying this is been fact-checked and this is false. Because if you have been sharing fake news and you don't and nobody tells you about it, but they only delete your post, well, it's as if nothing had happened. So this is what we are now working on. And of course, users we are also working with users, so for them to help us detect and have a much cleaner and leaner information in social media. Well, Demetrio, last question in the second round of questions for you. It's for you. And the monitoring that the European Commission is doing in order to see whether their agreements with the major companies, major platforms are respected. You think that it is a good monitoring, or is there room for improvement? Well, you need to bear in mind two things here. So why do fake news become viral, and why is it? Do they find it quite easy to spread. Why? Well, first, they always use, fake news publishers always use very impacting headlines that are they are restating prejudices, and they are sent out to people who are vulnerable, particularly receptive to this. And if they have had an impact on me, I will, of course, spread it and respread it in Twitter or whatever it is, ever increasingly so. So, about the monitoring, two things. I've been part of that monitoring. I've been I've been in charge of the anti-gypsyism analysis here in Spain. Not all platforms are alike. Some platforms are more woke than others. Since Elon Musk took the lead Twitter, things have changed. There was more moderation in Twitter. Now on X, it's virtually impossible to delete anything. They just look the other way. And monitoring activities should be more rigorous, I believe. Because if I'm telling the platforms, okay, I'm warning them beforehand that I'm going to conduct a monitoring, well, they already know. So the result, the outcome is not going to be as truthful as if I did a shadow monitoring, as it was the case last time. That's when I will be able to see what the rates are and what's happening in actual terms. Because if they are warned beforehand, they would make an extra effort to try and prove that they are doing something. It was clear on Twitter. You started reporting things, and then there was, a certain awareness. And now you have an algorithm that hides any information that you don't want to see, so you don't have to come across things you don't want to see. And they actually do everything using AI. I think that private companies, private businesses are very much mistaken. They believe that AI can replace everything. AI is a tool, but it's not everything. Let me give you a very simple explanation. For instance, let's say we have a machine and we're going to feed it a lot of information, and that machine will try and digest that information and give us an outcome, a result. If the information I'm feeding the machine is already has a gender bias, has ethnic bias, etc., of course the result is going to be biased as well. For many things, it might not be as important, but if we're speaking about healthcare, about social benefits, if we're speaking about being able to forecast or to be predictive, prime predictive, for instance, well, then that's becoming to get serious. And for security purposes, they are already using this kind of algorithms. And AI has a lot of advantages, and it's here to stay, but it also has a lot of dangers, and we need to know what the limits. We need to put the limits there. And then I'd like to speak about actions and activities, because otherwise we will be discussing in very conceptual terms, and that's where, and we will not be doing anything at all. So, and we have in social media, we have social media and mass media that are really informative, and others that are misinforming. Some publications are misinforming, and they will, they will always say that there is freedom of speech, and they will not do anything at all, because newspapers, for instance, newspapers and mass media, they have been exclusively created by extreme right people who are very xenophobic. They are very prejudiced in many ways. and that we led an initiative, okay, because nobody really likes to be outed. I mean, if you are a business and you don't want to be, you don't want to be publishing your ads in a newspaper where really it is widely known as morally or ethically biased. Okay, so but if you're trying to submit your moral arguments or your ethical arguments to those publications, they won't do anything because they couldn't care less. But if you if you try and have an influence on the advertisers, and they one by one start to withdraw because they don't want to be associated with those newspapers, that's where it hurts. And that's where they will really decide not to do anything. And because I mean, we really need to act. People are killing themselves because of bullying situations. We as a group are living as a Roma population. We are suffering. We're enduring a collective trauma. We need to act. When can you speak about a collective trauma when there's a group of people who are suffering a constant attack and we have no means of responding to it? Of course, there is a psychological impact. There is a health impact. This is and it is a structural thing, and this is why we need to be controlling hate speech, and we need to be clear about what we can consider hate speech or not. And well, I mean, the definition of hate speech here in Spanish legislation, it's not as precise as it should be. If we go to the European Court of Justice, hate crimes are very loosely defined in the Spanish criminal code. In other European countries, they can, when there's a hate crime, they can already contact or report it to the law enforcement agencies. And this is for targeted ethnic groups that we are the victims of those extreme rights, Nazi and fascist groups who are actually who own a major part of the virtual world. This is what we would need here in Spain, a clear definition of hate crime. And sorry, I couldn't. Just one thing, I couldn't conclude here. And thank you very much, because anti-Gypsyism is now finally classified as a crime, and we can finally have statistics on it. So it's good to start having statistics for this, because racist crimes or race bias crimes, yes, but it was general. Now we have Gypsyism classified as well.
Well, as you can see, this is a very deep subject. We thought it was a harder, a tougher bone to chew, but the truth is that our speakers have mentioned so many interesting points. We could write an article about it. Before I open the Q&A round, I would like to thank you for coming before it gets too late, and thank you also very much for paying so much attention. I see that the speakers had a raptured audience, and particularly Demetrio. Now, let me give the floor now to the audience for questions, if there are any. If you could please mention the speaker that you would like to address your question. And also, let me tell you, you have 3 minutes. My name is Dr. Guillermo Sese. If I had 2 presentations yesterday, I'm a forensic doctor and president of Afro-Hispanic. And this question goes to, well, anyone and everyone on the dais, maybe Tomas in particular. And with all due respect to the director, I will not compare legislations, but I trained in Barcelona at the Forensic Medicine Institute, and I've worked with unaccompanied minors extensively. It's on us to do the report, to establish their age, because many of them come unidentified. And based on our report, their path goes one way or another, and they have access to different mechanisms for protection. Now, my concern is how the far right in Spain, Vox in particular, has permanently used during the campaigns the unaccompanied minor concept. Now, the population at large, on a campaign post, they saw an old Spanish lady, well dressed, and next to a young guy with his face covered and dressed poorly. And on that poster, it said, because of the resources needed for an unaccompanied minor, this old lady doesn't have access to her pension. This should be prosecuted. It should receive an administrative sanction. And beyond the fact that the politicians who use this will have immunity, there should really be a way so that it's not really civil society that needs to put a claim, but rather the attorney's office. There is clearly hate crime there, and they are inciting hatred in society. You're right. I think in this particular case, the attorney's office started an investigation. That's a good question for Miguel Ángel Aguilar, the attorney. He would have explained this very well. Now, the truth is that in some cases, we do receive these things. Ex officio, the attorney is starting investigations, and the competent attorneys are starting investigations on particular matters. Now, what is the problem? From a legal standpoint, and I believe this has been mentioned by Miguel Ángel Aguilar or some other speaker yesterday, the criminal law ratio problem, and I believe they're trying to solve it, as you mentioned, from an administrative point of view, right? Because the victim says, why would I put forth a claim? It's going to go unheard. So this goes into underreporting, right? Oftentimes, these things cannot be reported, and they come to nothing. So there is a tool. Barcelona has a fantastic tool, the general administrative law. There is also one here in Andalusia, but it does not have the power to sanction. This would help us bridge the gap between a claim on freedom of speech and a crime. Because from an administrative point of view, this actually, might be sanctionable. That's the gap we need to bridge from a legal standpoint, as I said, for the victim, not for us. Otherwise, the victims just won't put forward their claims. We had a survey in 2021. The outcome was very similar to the FRA's. 1 or 2 out of 10 sue. This past Monday, we started our new survey in the website of the Ministry of Interior, and then the fight against hate crimes within our site is for any people who felt they've been victims or they witnessed hate crimes. There are cold data, unfortunately, but they are still useful, and we need to do these surveys. And the industry is carrying out these surveys as well to know this in further detail. So that's one of the problems, lack of trustworthiness on the side of the victim. There are some laws, some regional laws, but they're very specific. In Barcelona, they do have a general one, and there's one, the 15/2022 here in Andalusia, which is very familiar with it because there have been some articles published, but we still need the administrative authority. And then anti-Gypsyism, we have it since 2019 in our reports. We saw the need to break it down into something specific. Many associations requested it, and we had it included because the more we know, the better. In fact, we would like to zoom in even more and do more things, but the problem also is that it becomes very complicated for law enforcement officers to execute, right? So we really need to balance this. From our side, the more information we have, the better. Surveys are very important. And by the way, please do fill in the surveys we send you. So with the modification of the criminal code to include anti-Gypsyism, we're going to receive a big boost in the equal treatment and non-discrimination law will also be very helpful. Now, there is a point that Guillermo made that I would like to pick up. There is a sort of a gap we need to breach between what's criminal and what is not. If you look at the extremes, everything is clear, but in the middle, it is not. There is a very thin line, and I don't think that this is really the technique. I do think legislators, we are the ones who develop laws in this country. And why am I talking about this? Because when there is a hate crime or hate speech targets a particular person, that is one thing. It's another thing when we're talking about something collective. The poster that you're mentioning from the campaign, meaning your grandma is receiving 400 euros and as pension, and Menas are taking away 1,400 from her. It was crazy. And then they had the posters in Madrid. It is not a hate crime, we know that, but the truth is that citizens need to see that the administration, the institutions react. The attorney's office actually reacted, but there was no hate crime, so they had to file the complaint. What is the takeaway for the perpetrators here? It's free to do this, and that's what society can see. It's a contradiction. It's awful. We need to work on this, and all public institutions and public powers need to send out the message. We don't want people to be left alone. The minorities, please don't feel you're out there on your own fighting the struggle. No, quite the opposite. I don't want to take more time from you, because we're bringing this roundtable to an end, and I don't want to steal your thunder. Congratulations to all the speakers. It's really been an honor to have you. Everything you've shared was just so very useful today. So congratulations. Okay. Well, I don't think we are wrapping up yet. And Natalia would like to address this point. Yes, in connection with what Guillermo mentioned, and Tomás as well. For the last 18 to 24 months, we've seen some reactions against well, people who had published fake news in social media, fake news regarding unaccompanied minor. These people were tried and found guilty for a hate crime, and they had to close their social net profiles, and they had to pay a fine. So we do see some reactions regarding hate crimes and spreading hate speech. We see some reactions in the right direction, in fact. Very quickly, let me mention the silver lining. I must say that the work of law enforcement officers is brilliant. They really lead and show the way. I was part of Vivaspe in Valencia, and I trained the police, law enforcement officers, and regarding anti-Gypsyism, and the work carried out with law enforcement officers who do the day-to-day work in hate crimes is absolutely amazing. Also, as user, I had to file a claim for a hate crime, and I was treated very nicely by law enforcement officers. There is another question. Yes. Since we're talking about hate crime, there's something that we should bear in mind, which is that as of today, there are no safe whistleblower channels for people who have come without in an irregular situation. Often these people come to to sue someone for theft, and they come out of the police station with a deportation order. So we really need to see how these people can file a claim safely, and this should be in our agenda to make sure we guarantee the rights of everyone. Thomas, I believe this one is for you. Well, Beatriz already left, but yes, the associations are asking for this, and we are working on it. In terms of legal certainty, I don't know. There's talk about the foreigners' law. I don't know how it will come out in the end, but I understand the final outcome will be very similar to what has been done in gender violence. The forensic doctor, Guillermo, has touched upon this. We've been working on gender violence. The prejudice at the end is the same, right? At its core, gender-based violence is hate crime. But when there is other piece of a specific legislation, it doesn't fall within the pool of hate crime. I mean, it is hate against the woman, but because it's within the spouse or partner's sphere, we've considered it differently. We would have misogyny. Anyway, so there are many guidelines we've used with gender-based violence to try to learn the lessons and leverage best practices. I don't want to call them hate crimes, but rather negative prejudice or intolerance, lack of tolerance crimes. The translation into Spanish is very literal because we need to find an understanding Europe-wide, and at FRA and Demetrio, you know this very well. Anyway, so we're working on this, and I don't know what will be the final outcome, but yes, this exists in gender-based violence, but not in hate crimes. Now, another important point, police statistics. We know for a fact racism is top of the list. The second one is LGTB phobia, and third, ideology. And that one is harder to nail down, but those are the top three ranking the hate crime list. I believe we're on time. It's I need to close the roundtable. Thank you very much. You've had a sensational performance. Would you like to say something, David?
I also cannot comment on the situation in Spain, but just to reiterate that as was mentioned, the point is, of course, also with the legislators to work on clear guidance on what is illegal and what is not. And for example, there's the EU framework decision for hate speech, which is okay. So when it comes to the definition of what is illegal and criminal hate speech, there's the framework decision of the EU on illegal hate speech. And unfortunately, the Commission had to start infringement proceedings against several EU member states. I think Spain is not among them. Last year, that it was not properly implemented. There were also interesting court cases at the European Court on Human Rights in Strasbourg about who is responsible for hate speech, where, for example, politicians post something online and then hate speech comes in the comments to these posts. Because legal content, of course, can also challenge and encourage others to post illegal content. So this is an ongoing discussion, and especially how to deal with, and I think that's a comment I wanted to make on what in English is often referred to as lawful but awful. And what are good tools at EU level, and these I wanted to mention at the end, is again, the Digital Services Act is relatively new, but it also has interesting provisions. For example, the very large online platforms, those who have at least 10% of users in the EU, they now have to submit on a yearly basis a report to the European Commission where they assess societal risks of their platform's conduct. And these include risks of fundamental rights, like discrimination, the right to dignity of people, the right to privacy online, and so forth. So a lot is ongoing, and while the online space, of course, creates new challenges, I think there are also opportunities that we have to tackle and use. For example, how to engage better in counter speech, to counter racism online, is also another important area I wanted to mention. The agency, we are also continuing doing surveys. We ask also better questions in the future about online experiences in our surveys. We will publish, for example, the third wave of our anti-Semitism survey in summer. We will publish a new report on the experiences of Muslims in October later this year. And as a very last sentence, we had a very good cooperation with the Spanish authorities under the Spanish presidency of the EU Council in publishing also our report on being black in the EU, which was very influential. And yeah, so I just wanted to end by thanking the ministry, also the other ministries, for the very good cooperation, which obviously now extends beyond the presidency, and look forward to continue this cooperation. Thank you.
Pues yo creo que ahora sí, ¿no? Ya no me dejo a nadie. Bueno, muchas gracias de nuevo.
I believe we can close now. Thank you very much. And well, next year we will celebrate another anti-racism week because there's still so much more to do. Thank you.